Praise be Jesus and Mary, seekers of Jesus. The book is the love letters from your Father. The Bible, the Gospel of John, as seen through the Lectio Divina, chapter by chapter. And we're now going from chapter 12 to chapter 13. Chapter 13 would be the Last Supper, and chapter 12 we had Jesus with the apostles and the Palm Sunday. So let's try to get some kind of the logistics. They're kind of tentative because it seems that if you simply read the scriptures, it looks like the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday that nothing happened. But a lot is happening. Jesus is very busy. And so we mentioned that the diaspora Jews and the Jews and all the reputation that Jesus had from the miracle working of 3 years comes to a head on Palm Sunday, where they actually acclaim him to be the Son of David, to be the Messiah. And naturally, the Pharisees and the coalition against Jesus tries to condemn it, but it's gone beyond them. They don't know how to control it. And they come together and say, well, we better kill him before the Sabbath, when the diaspora will disperse and go all over the world and say that he's the Son of God. Before, they were going to do it after, because after they would be more protected. They would have Jesus by himself, not having this crowd. But now there's crowds of people that are asserting that he is the Messiah, and they would spread that news all over the world. That had to be stopped. Right? So that's the scenario. But what happened then on this Monday after? They just retired? No, we didn't. And, what we can surmise is that since Mary would be present on Friday when he was carrying the cross, she must have been there already by Monday in Jerusalem. Probably came with these crowds of people that were acclaiming Jesus. And Mary was probably there with Mary Magdalene. Remember, in Jerusalem also were two sort of semi-secret disciples, two members of the Sanhedrin, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. So Jesus wasn't very much alone. But now the Tuesday and Wednesday, these people were coming and wanted to know who the Messiah was and check him out. So, especially members of the Sanhedrin, well, not the Sanhedrin, the diaspora foreign Jews, came there and approached Andrew and Philip, and they were Greeks. These were people that were recently converted, proselytes of the Pharisees. Now, so there was a gathering of people there who wouldn't leave Jesus alone. You had all the ones from the time of the friends of Lazarus. They had the Jews of Jerusalem. You had the diaspora Jews. Then you had the Greeks, the ones who had just been converted, wanted to know who Jesus was and what he claimed for himself. And there Jesus gives them several pointers. They're very significant. Remember, Jesus is dramatizing now. He's not working miracles. He's not trying to prove himself anymore. He's just going with the flow and let things happen to him. And he tells these Greeks and Jews and diaspora Jews that he is the light of the world. He's the light of the world. He repeats this, that the Son of Man is not just an ordinary man, he's the light of the world. Light of the world means God. And they claimed him correctly. He says, but work hard now on this. Grasp it. Don't lose the light, because it's going to look like the light is going to go out. Darkness is coming. I am going to be lifted up. But don't worry about it. Whatever you see now, you need faith. Faith. Whatever you see happening and you're witnessing, don't go by what the movements are of these human beings. Stick to the point of this, that I am the light. And darkness is going to come on this light now. It's going to be the supreme effort of darkness. It's be the time of Satan. And you must, what you have in your hand now, don't lose grasp of it. Because now you are correct. I am the light. The light will not be extinguished. You will think it will be extinguished, but it won't be extinguished. Trust in it. Trust me. I'm telling you what is really going to happen. You know, when people can see things in a prophetic way, it's clear to them. It's clear to Jesus. He knows what's going to happen. Everything is present to him. But it's not so to the followers, because we are blind. We are people who see, but yet are blind to the fulfillment of anything. We always go by what's happening now. And that is a defect. That is a limitation. When he's saying that darkness is going to descend on me, on your faith, but don't give up and don't give in. So he told him that it's now the time of darkness, but he will be lifted up. Now everything is closing in on him. It's a short time. In fact, it's the next couple of days, Thursday and Friday. So all that is going to come in a few hours. So that is what's happening. It's a day of concern. It's a day of Jesus insisting on faith, on seeing with his eyes, through his eyes. We don't see it ourselves. We're in the present. And he knows exactly what's going to happen. Preparation day comes, the Thursday. And all of this is happening all the way through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and most of Thursday. But he's preparing now. And who starts the preparation day? Who starts preparing before the Friday? Remember, there'll be a little confusion in your minds, because the way that we think and is presented to us in our culture is that Thursday is like our Thursdays, that the days begin at midnight. But you have to, and the confusion starts because the days don't begin at midnight in the Jewish calculation. They begin at sunset, what we would say the previous day. So, for instance, if we were to say, when does Friday begins, that would be as soon as it would be sunset on Thursday, like 6 o'clock on Thursday night, and right after that, after 6 o'clock, becomes Friday. So keep that in mind. So on this Thursday, when the preparation is being made for the Seder, and Jesus is having it a day before the people normally have it, the festival for the high holy day of Passover, when they're killing the lambs, they're roasting the lambs to have the Seder meal to talk about the coming of the Messiah. He's already here, so he's having it before, and he does it because of his dramatization. But Judas, when Judas is coming into the picture now, because while all this preparation is being made, and Jesus is saying, go and find these people that are going to give us the room for the Seder meal, which was the place of the Last Supper. And they're doing all the preparations, because when Jesus goes there, it'll all be ready. The meals will be all prepared. And we believe that that was the house of Mark's parents. And so you have now, when all of this is going on in this preparation, Judas leaves the group and he goes to Caiaphas. This is before the Last Supper. Judas is strange now, and we have to focus on Judas, who Judas is, and what he was doing. He seems to be a person who has a weak faith. We saw already from the time of Capernaum, when Jesus was talking about giving his flesh and blood to people as the bread of heaven, and the yeshiva, the Jewish Pharisees, the Jewish teachers, the scribes at Capernaum said, we can't believe it, we can't swallow this. How are you going to give flesh and blood to people to eat and drink? And that would be the manna from heaven. And they declared Jesus to be crazy, insane. They didn't believe he was the Son of God. And the apostles were not strong in their faith yet. And the one who was weakest was Judas. So from that time on, he was the weak link of the 12 apostles. So we're going to focus now on Judas. Because Judas, when the preparation was being made for the Seder, what we call the Last Supper, Judas went off by himself and he went to the high priest. He had heard that they wanted to kill him, that wanted to kill Jesus. Now, there's the different biblical scholars are saying, who is this Judas and what was his game? It's not mentioned specifically in the scriptures. It's just saying that he's a traitor. Well, a traitor has many ramifications. What was his attitude? Well, look into it. First of all, who was Judas? It says Judas Iscariot. That wasn't his name. They're trying to say a place where probably Jesus contacted him or he contacted Jesus. But there's two places by that name. There's one in Judea and one in Galilee. But when they say what is his name is Judas Bar Shimon, Bar Simon. It's like it said, what was Peter's name? His name was Simon Bar Jonah. John and James, the son Bar Zebedee. Bar, you say the son of. But in regard to Judas, they don't say the son of except once. And that was his proper name, was Judas Bar Shimon. But where does this word Iscariot come from? Does it come from the cities, or a city, which we don't know which one it was that it came from? But there's a special word, and there's a special designation that's constantly given to Judas by the others. And he's called the bagman, the scortia, one who wears the leather apron, one who carries the bag, the treasurer, in a simple sense, the steward, the treasurer of the organization. He carried the bag. He wore the leather apron. Maybe that was his job. That was his career. It's like we say, well, one is designated as being a zealot. It's what he did. Doesn't give it. It's not his name. Simon the Zealot. So the designations are given in different ways. So Zechariah, the priest, or the publican. And so it's a little confusing to say who he was, but they're constantly referring to him as the bagman, the man who carried the bag for the alms. Well, we know that Jesus was not receiving money. He did his preaching and teaching as a prophet and went with his disciples. And what was the normal thing with disciples, with yeshivas, when they went out with their students? The Pharisees went out with their students from their biblical schools, from their schools that they called yeshiva, their group. They went out, and when they did preaching and all that, people would give them alms, would pay their teachers. You know, when I was in the Orient and was in connection with the Buddhists, and I noted that in the Buddhist monasteries where I was with them, that they had no cooks. They didn't have kitchens. And I thought it was strange. But every day, the monks go out carrying the big wooden bowl and just walk through the streets. They pray, or they sit down and teach. And I did that in circles with them in some of the villages as a missionary and as a evangelist, just to mix in with them and to see how they did it. And people would put food into their bowl. When that bowl was filled, they went back to the monastery. And some had a big bowl for the monks that were old and weren't able to go out into the streets anymore. And they would have their meals in the monastery. And I noted that, like with St. Francis of Assisi, he did the same thing. He simply went out and says, don't ask and don't refuse. People gave him food, he ate it. He was a beggar. That's why they call him a beggar. But he didn't beg. He simply did the work of the Lord, and people gave him things. Later, when the order was very significant and very well organized, they became kind of wealthy, and that was contrary to the spirit of St. Francis. And he resented it. And something like that was happening with Jesus. After he cured people, after he rose people from the dead, especially like the son of Shusa, and Joanna, the wife of Shusa, who was an official of the court of King Herod in Galilee. She followed Jesus with others, with Susanna, and other women followed Jesus and helped him with his sustenance. They gave money. And so what Judas had started out to just be the treasurer, to handle a few alms, to receive them and to use them for their daily care, for Jesus' companions, and their daily care. More was coming in. And so he was the treasurer, and he was the alms giver, to give alms out to other poor people. They didn't collect money and just say, oh, we're getting, this is great, we don't need anything anymore, we're going to build a house or something. No, it was a give and take all the time. A take and give and take. They gave teaching and received alms, just as like a beggar. Jesus went around being a beggar. That's what St. Francis always says about Jesus. He was a beggar. And in that sense, that whatever was left over, they gave out to other people. They didn't accumulate. But now you had this thing with Judas. Judas was a bad man. He was a treasurer. And when he saw more and more money coming in, and it says it in the scripture, and John says it, and Peter says it, that he began to take money for himself, began to embezzle, looking for his future. And so he just, as that accumulated, he could say the bag man had it made. He had a career of his own, not just to witness Jesus, and not just to admire him or listen to his teaching, but to collect the money. And so, gradually, when you can start out as an honest man, but it begins to stick to your fingers like honey. More and more. You begin taking it for yourself. No. You have a bag man, but you have an honest one. And the others were noticing it. And they may have been saying that to him too. He's lowering his reputation. But here it is, at the time when he wanted more money and figured he could have money, and he could accept bribes. Now with Caiaphas was a bribe. They needed information, and they were willing to pay for it. Judas probably didn't have the full information yet, but he went to Caiaphas and says, I can get it for you. I can get it for you. Right now, Jesus is busy. Jesus is involved. All these people are around him. They're even giving him a place for the Seder meal. They're being very generous with him. Lazarus is being generous with him. But I believe that when the time comes, when he is alone, because he separates himself from us to go and pray, he'll be alone, and it'll be safe to capture him. It's not safe with all these crowds, with all these people that would oppose you and cause a riot. But I can do it for you. Now, whether or not he really believed he can do it, or that he was going to do it, maybe he had the attitude that he had seen Jesus pass through the ones who tried to capture him. He always managed to escape before. Maybe he thought he'd get the money and run, and that they would be unsuccessful. Whatever it is, we don't know. All we know is then, at the Last Supper, Jesus says Satan came into him. It became a goal. Instead of a test or making some kind of a deal, it became a goal for him. So Judas Iscariot, the bagman, was a danger. His doubts, he didn't correct his doubts from Capernaum, and he made a career out of collecting the money and distributing it and being a steward. And he was the weak point on the weak link on the chain. So that's what we have there. And now the Seder time is coming. The Seder time is coming, and the evening is occurring. And the evening at sunset, this Thursday becomes Friday. And there's an important thing to see here, because if you talk about the logistics, everything that happens from now on, the Last Supper, all of the dramatization of Jesus, all occurs within 24 hours. Because if you go around the clock, the 24 hours of this Friday beginning at sunset, and it ends sunset the next day, when that becomes Sabbath, that's what the time that they have to hurry up and bury him, because the Sabbath is falling after his crucifixion. So all of the incidents from now on occur within 24 hours. So you have to understand that too, and know why Jesus not only was bleeding and tired, but he had no sleep, and why the apostles were sleeping when he was struggling at Gethsemane. So try to put your mind to the way that the hours go in the Jewish system. Now we have the evening of what would be Thursday, which actually begins, sunset begins Friday. And that's when the Last Supper occurs. By our calculation, it's on Thursday night, Thursday, but by the Jewish calculation, it's Friday. And Jesus has this big dramatization. They start the meal, they all, sometimes try to figure out how the table, what kind of a table they had there. And some say it was circular, some say it was straight, and our European artists always put it as a straight table. But I made a little diagram of it here, and I think they have to be more like this. And you see that? Like semicircular, because it says they prepared couches. They didn't sit at chairs. Couches. They lay down. They lay down on their left arm. And if it says then in John's Gospel that John Evangelist is at the breast of Jesus, which means he's on his right side facing him, and Jesus is on his left elbow. That Peter is behind him. He's over his shoulder. So if Peter wants to talk to John to get Jesus' attention, because Jesus is facing that way, then he would be behind Jesus. Then the indication is of the positions that Judas would be opposite Jesus. He could reach out. It says he reached out with him with the kasuth, the bread dipped in the apple and raisin paste. When he let him out of the house, he could reach right over to him. That would make him in the center. And the other apostles, 4 on each side, gives you 12 apostles. And so Jesus, after he gives the blessing of the food at the table and dedicates the Seder meal as proper to Yahweh, to his Father, then he does something unusual. Instead of continuing the Seder with the lamb and the food that is there, he gets up from his position, puts on an apron, and probably takes his robe off, his outer robe, puts an apron on, and gets water, a container of water that they had in the Jewish homes all the time for washing the feet of the visitors, of people who came. They had to wash themselves. They had to wash as a sign of submission, of respect to others, to wash their feet. And it says clearly that their feet were sticking out down at the end of the couch, and Jesus went from one to the other to wash their feet. It's shocking. And Jesus says, "Do you see what I'm doing to you?" It's a dramatization. He's giving them an object lesson. You're always wondering who is the leader, who's not the leader. You're all equal. But I come to you as a servant. Your job today, you all think you're going to be princes. The 12 princes of the kingdom of God. And I am the king. I am the Messiah. But the work you're going to do is not exactly what the misinterpretation of the Pharisees is. You're to be princes, but not princes in that way. You're to be leaders with me. Princes of your connection to me. King of kings, Lord of lords. But I'm coming to you now to show you something of how you have to deal with each other. I come to you now as your servant. The king is not one that you always serve, but the Son of Man, in his humanity, comes to you to serve you. All of the things that I do in this world is to serve the people, to bring them to the Father. That's the message of the Father, the love letters of the Father, from the Father, the Scriptures. Look at all the prophets. Yes, they're great. We give them names. We give them high positions in recognition. But each one came as a servant of the people. Moses served the people in Exodus. They served. Sometimes they didn't have to say they were servants. They were thrown out by the leaders and the elders and the kings who didn't want to follow the commandments and who abused the commandments and reinterpreted them for their own benefit. But here I come to serve, wash your feet. As the lowest servant in this house. And I am the leader. You are all to serve each other, not to lord it over each other, but to serve each other. And he went to each one of them. He came to Peter. Peter says, no, you're not going to wash my feet. You are the leader. You are the Son of God. He says, Peter, eyes of faith, not eyes, the blind eyes of present man. If I do not wash your feet and dramatize this for you so you never forget it, be humble enough to accept my humility. Be humble enough to accept my humility. I wish to serve you. God the Almighty Father, who has heaven and earth, who created everything and created you, you little imp. He serves you by sending me. He serves you by giving you life. He serves you by giving you eternal life. Don't act in an idolatrous way and try to make him serve you. He serves you as he wills to serve you. And he wills to serve you as a father would serve his children and remain a father. Peter, you don't understand now. Get it into your thick skull. If you do not accept his teaching, you can have no part of me. You have no right to be the leader I want you to be. He also washed the feet of Judas, making the last effort to make him understand how much the Lord is willing to forgive. And he says, yes, all of you are clean and only need your feet washed, except for one. Doesn't mention the name. They're not sure what he's saying. He keeps confidentiality. He wants to reach the heart of one man. And there's no need to use the others to let him know the truth. Not all of you are clean. Even though I wash your feet, you're not clean. You've given your heart to Satan, and I know it. You already went to Caiaphas. He knows it. You already worked out to betray. There's still time to pull back. There's still time to be embarrassed and return the money you have in your bag now. Judas didn't get the money after. He had the gall to bring blood money to the table of the Lord. A lot of lessons here for us as Christians. The Lord gives us talents to work for people. Yes. A laborer is worthy of his hire. But to sell God and to make hay through Jesus Christ and to lord it over others, all the apostles, all the leaders, the Pope himself calls himself the servant of the servants of God. That's his official title. Pontifex Maximus, these high titles are not the scriptural titles. And Judas had his title already. His comrades and his peers already caught on and called him the bagman. The bagman can have a good job to do with collecting the alms and distributing. In fact, you note that when finally he left the table and went out, the apostles thought he was going out to give some money to the poor. What Jesus saw was a man with the bag money and blood money has no place where I am going to give my body and my blood for your food. The two cannot be on the same table. It's time to meditate and talk to Jesus about this. I'll pray for you, and I ask that you always